Hello all, in this particular tutorial we will learn how to install IBM DB2 12.1 on Red Hat Linux 9.4. These are the high-level steps. Download DB2 database server software from IBM website. Install the DB2 database server using db2_install. Create the database using db2 icreate. Create the database using create database statement. Connect to the database using connect to statement. So if you see the steps here is download the software, install the software, create the instance, create the database, connect to the database. Let's see these steps one by one. So to install the software, you need to download the software from the IBM website. You need IBM ID. If you don't have one, create one. Once you have downloaded the software, unzip that particular software. Once you unzip that particular software, you will find a utility called DB2 prerequisite check. Use DB2 prerequisite check to check the prerequisites, which means that here we are checking whether the operating system where we are going to install the DB2 meets the requirement. Does it have all the necessary packages? If it does not have the necessary packages, the DB2 prerequisite check is going to inform about those missing packages, and then we can take the action. Once the DB2 prerequisite check is completed successfully, use the DB2 install to install the DB2 database server. Once the installation is completed, you are now ready to create the DB2 instance. To create the instance, you need the instance owner user account on the operating system. So you need a user ID on the operating system where you are going to create the instance. To create the instance, we'll use the db2 icreate command. And the db2 icreate command that particular command will be found in the db2 installation directory. Once the instance has been created, we can switch to that particular instance. So here, this DPP is nothing but the instance owner. Here you can use based on your requirement, you can use whatever instance owner ID that you want to use. That becomes the instance owner or instance name. Once you switch to that particular instance, automatically you are connected to that particular instance, and then you can use the db2 start to start the db2 instance. Once the instance has been created and the instance has been started, we are now ready to create the database. So create the database using create database statement, and then you are ready to connect to the database using connect to statement. Now let's see the steps one by one in detail. So the software that you download will look something like this. It will be a zip file. Untar that particular file to a particular directory. Once you untar that particular software, you will find a new directory called server_des. This server means it's a database server software, and DEC stands for Developer Community Edition. Once you download this particular software and untar that, you can use the db2 prerequisite check. Here we are saying db2 prerequisite check for whether this particular operating system meets the 12.1.1 version, and if it does meet the required version, if it does meet the requirements, then you can use the db2 install to install the database software. So once the installation has been completed, we can then go to this particular directory. This is the default directory where the db2 will get installed. You can, while installing the db2 database software, you have the choice of changing it. If you don't change it, then this is the default location where the db2 database software will get installed. Under that, you will find a directory called instance. Go to that particular directory, and under that instance subdirectory, you will find another utility called db2 icreate, which we will use to create our db2 instance. The way we will be creating our db2 instance is db2 icreate -u dbp. The first is your fenced user ID. The second one is your instance owner ID. This is actual instance owner ID, the second one, not the first one. This is the fenced user ID. Now, in your production, let me repeat, in your production, use the fenced user ID separate as the instance owner. Since I'm doing this in a lab, I'm going to use the same account for both, but in your production, use the fenced user ID separate as the instance owner. And let me repeat, the last part is your instance owner. This is your instance name. So once the instance has been created, you can switch to that particular user ID. Switching to that particular user ID indicates that you are connecting to that instance, and then you can use the db2 start to start the db2 instance, and then you can verify if the db2 cc process is running. Every instance will have individual db2 cc process, and if the db2 cc process is running, that means probably your instance is running fine. Now, once the instance is started and if the instance is running, you can go ahead and create the database using create database db name. So here, if you want to create a database called test, you will say db2 create database test. And if you want to verify if the databases are present, what databases are present on our system, you can use list database directory. List database directory will give us the databases which are present in our system. Now, if you want to, once you have created the database using create database command, you can connect to the database using connect to the database name. So connect, if you want to connect to the test, you will say connect to test, and db2 get connection state will give you if you are connected to any database and which database. So connection state will identify whether you have connected to any database. Now that we have seen everything, let us begin the labs. But before I proceed the labs, let me repeat the high level steps once again. So the steps are downloading the software, installing the software using db2 install, creating the instance using db2 icreate, creating the database using create database, and connect to the database using connect to. So now that we have seen high level steps, let's proceed with our lab. So before I go to the session, let me actually go to this location here. And here what I've searched for is download DB2 12.1 community edition. Now here it gives me multiple links. I'm going to choose this link, get a jump start with IBM DB2 community edition. So this is the link. And if I slowly scroll down, here, I get this DB2 standard download. And if I click on this DB2 standard download, I'll get this link. And let me actually close this. I'll get this particular link, and here if I click on scroll down a little bit, then you will find this community edition. This is what we are installing, and you can click on this download DB2. Once you click on this download DB2, you will get this particular link here, and here you can see we got this 12.1.1 latest, and here it shows Microsoft Windows, Linux, the AIX, etc. So based on your operating system, since we are going to do this on Linux, I'm going to choose Linux. So this particular thing is going to download this particular, and you can see the DB2 12.1 software is started downloading. Now I have already downloaded this particular software, so I'm going to cancel this and I'm going to minimize it. So now let's begin. So before I actually install, let me run one single command here, and that command is db2 ls. This particular command will give me an output if there is any DB2 product and which DB2 product, which version, where it is located. If this command cannot be found, then probably there is no DB2 product which is installed on this machine. Let's see what exactly happens. And it says DB2 ls command not found, which means that there is no DB2 product which is installed on this machine. This is a RHEL 9.4 machine, and we are going to install DB2 version 12 on this. And right now there is no DB2 product which is installed on this particular machine. So let's do something. Let's go to this particular location where I've saved the softwares. And here you can see we got this, this is the actual DB2 database software. This is the client software. Since we are interested in installing the database software, I'll choose this particular software. So now this particular software is what we need to untar. So it is in the ZZ format. So let me untar that using this particular command. And what this particular command is going to do is going to extract that particular software into this directory. So tar -xf, the name of that particular file, name of this particular file, -c into this location. So give it a few seconds for the untar to finish. Once the untar is finished, that is finished. Let's go to that particular location, and under that you will find, under this location you will find a directory called server des. That is nothing but database server software developer. DEC stands for developer community edition. So let's go to that particular location, and under this you will find an utility called the DB2 prerequisite check, which we will use to verify if all the requirements at the operating system level are met, all the packages are present for the DB2 to get successfully installed. And the DB2 install is the second package that we will use to actually install the DB2 database software. So let's run the DB2 prerequisite check. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it here, DB2 prerequisite check for version 12.1.1. And you can see here it gives us the requirement for pure scale feature. Since we are not going to install the pure scale, I'm going to ignore this particular warning. And here for this particular server version. So we are interested in installing the database server, and it says that it could not find a 32-bit library for this lippam package, and I'm also going to ignore that particular warning. So apart from this warning, looks like everything else is met, so that is good. So now we are going to use the db2 install. So the DB2, this is from the downloaded and extracted package. So the DB2 install is the one which I'm going to use to install the DB2 software. Now, first thing, do you accept the license? Yes. And as I mentioned, it will by default, it will install in this particular directory. Now you have a choice to install in some other directory. If you want to change the directory, you have to say no and give the different directory. But since I'm going to choose the default directory, I'm going to say yes. And now it asks us whether you want to install the server, connect server, client, and runtime client. Since we want to create the database, we have to go with the server option. Now it will ask us whether we want to go for the pure scale feature. We are not interested in the pure scale feature, so I'm going to say no to the pure scale feature. Now it again gives us this warning that it could not find this 32-bit lippam, which is fine. I'm going to ignore that. The installation is started. Installation has 56 steps. Here you could see. Let me actually put it here. Okay, it's moving so quickly. Yeah, here 56. If you grab this, there are 56 steps. And it's going to install all of these components. The 47th step is slightly longer, where it actually sets the DB2 library path. It says estimated time as 180 seconds. It's definitely not going to take 180 seconds, but it's definitely going to take significant amount of time. This is the largest step in the DB2 installation. So give it a few seconds. And that is still going and that mode. And you can see it says the execution completed with warnings. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a look at this particular log, and I'm going to see if there are any significant warnings that I should be worried with. Let me take that particular log, and here you can see success, 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 success. So that must be something which I'm not really interested, because everything looks good. If you really wanted to dig down, you can always take a look at the log and find out what happened, but I'm not going to worry about that. Now, the first command that we ran here was the db2ls, which actually gave us the output whether there was any product on this particular server, the db2 product on this particular server. That is the first command that I ran. Let me run exactly same command once again, and now you can see we got the version 12.1. So we got the version 12.1 fixpack 0 installed, and what date it's installed, and where is that install location. The db2ls command, when we ran first, could not give us any output. It said command not found, but now we got the output, which means that we have successfully installed version 12.1.1 on this particular server. So the installation part is completed. So once the installation part is completed, so the db2 install part is completed, now we will proceed with the instance creation, followed by creating the database, followed by connecting to the database. So to create the instance, what we need to do is we need to go to this particular directory. Wherever the db2 is installed, we need to go to that particular directory. Under that particular directory, you will find a subdirectory called instance. And let's go to that particular directory. And under that particular directory, you will find another program called db2 icreate. So I'm under the installation. So this is the default installation location. Under that instance directory, and under that there is a utility called db2 icreate, and I'm going to use that particular utility to create our db2 instance. To do that, I'm going to say db2 icreate -u fenced user ID instance owner. Remember, the first ID is the fence owner, the second ID is actually the instance owner. Now in your production, you should give a separate fenced user and separate instance owner, but since this is a lab, this is fine. So let me hit enter. Now this particular, there are 4 steps, and it says estimated time is 309. So, and this particular configuring db2 instance is 300 seconds. Now 300 seconds is significantly large amount of time, and it is not going to take that much time. In my experience, it doesn't take that time, and the execution completed successfully. So at this moment, our instance is created successfully. So let me close this, and let me go to the, now let's, to connect to that instance, what we will do, we will say su -dbp, and this particular command basically means that we have attached to that particular instance. Now there is a separate command called attach, which I'm not going to cover, but basically at this moment we are connected to our instance. Now to verify if our instance is running, to verify if what is the instance name, we can use the instance name is nothing but your instance user ID, and you can use the DB2 get instance, and you can see that the current database instance is DBP, which is the same as the instance user name or instance user ID. So in your Linux, the user ID becomes the instance owner or instance name. So that looks good. Now, before we try to create the database, if I try to create the database, it will fail because it will say the instance has now started. So if I say db2 create database, it's going to fail. This command is going to fail because the instance is now started. So the no start database is run. So to start the instance, and I can also verify if the db2cc process is running. So if I run this ps-af grep db2cc, you can see that there is no db2cc process which is running on this particular machine. So to start the db2, what we can do, we can run the command called db2 start. Let's run this particular command, and this particular command will start the db2 instance. That looks good. And if I run exactly same command now, we can see the db2cc process running under user ID dbp, which means that the instance is running on, instance has been started and it is running on this particular machine. And now if we run this particular command db2 create database test, which actually failed, it will run fine. So, but before I run that particular command, before I run this particular command, let me actually open one more session, and let me actually go to a directory. Let me go to the, let me grep for, and I'm going to show you what I'm looking for. db2 get dbm config grep for diac path. What this does, and actually I should be logged in as a instance owner. This is, I'm looking at the instance directory. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this, and here what I'm searching for is the location where the diagnostic db2 diagnostic files are stored. This is a pretty important directory. Anything that happens with the db2, there will be a file. If you go to this particular directory, under this particular directory there will be a file called db2 diag log. This is the first file that you should see if anything that you ran a command and it is not working, and if that command is not giving you enough information of why that failed, then you should look at the db2 diag.log. If your instance is not starting, you should look at the db2 diag log. So this is the first log that you should always check when there is something which is not working with the db2. And how did I get that? I said db2 get dbm config, look for diag path, and I went to that location, and under that location there is a file called db2 diag.log. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to follow that particular file. I'm going to follow that particular file, and you can see that particular file is not moving, which means that there is no activity which is happening on the instance. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to before I create a database, let me actually run a command called db2 list database directory. I'm going to take this command and I'm going to run this particular command. And this particular command, you can see the database directory cannot be found on the system. So this particular command, I can also say list db directory, which is exactly same. So if you are lazy and if you don't want to run the full command, you can say db2 list db directory, and the database directory cannot be found, which means that instance is running. However, there is no database in this instance. So to create the database, you will use the command create database and the name of the database. So let's take that and let's hit enter. And as you can see, when I hit enter, the log quickly mode. So the log quickly mode. So what's going to do in the background is going to move this particular log. So as and when it does that activity, it's going to, so whatever as you can see, it's moving, which means the database is getting created. So I'm going to, the database creation is significantly big amount of time. I do not want to waste your time. So I'm going to pause it and come back once the database is almost to be completed or created. So as you can see, the database creation is still running. I am expecting it to finish anytime soon. So that's why, and you can see the create database completed successfully. Now that looks good. Now if I run exactly same command again, db2 list db directory, here we got the database directory cannot be found. Now if I run the exactly same command, we can see we got one entry and one database called test, which is indirect. Indirect means the database which is hosted on this particular instance. So that looks good. So we have got one database called test created in this particular instance. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually show you I'll try to create one more database called first1234, and this particular database. Now the command that I ran to create the database is this, and if I run the same command once again, it's going to fail. because there is already a database called test, and you cannot have two databases with the same name under the same instance. And you can see the database alias test already exists. You cannot create two databases with the same name under the same instance. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to exactly take same command and I'm going to change this to first 1 2 3 4, and this particular command is going to fail. And the reason for that is because you can see the first 1 2 3 4 is not a valid database name, and the reason for that is the DB2 allows you to create the database with the name with the maximum length of character 8, and here first is 5 and 1 2 3 4 is 4, which means 5 plus 4 9, which exceeded the length limit of 8. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to exactly take the same command and I'm going to hit this first 1 2 3. So I'm going to remove that 4, so it becomes 5 plus 3 and it becomes 8, and this time if I run this, it's going to successfully complete, and you can see it has started creating first 1 2 3, which means that remember to create, when you create a database, make sure the length of the database is maximum 8. So the second database is getting created. Let me pause the video and come back once this is about to be done. So I expect this to be completed. I expect this database to complete soon. So that's why I unpaused and I wanted to show you in front of you that, yeah, and the create database command completed successfully. So that looks good. Now, if I run the same command, db2 list db directory, we should now see two databases, one called test, one called first 1 2 3. So that is how we created two databases in our system. Now these two databases are different. So test database is different, first 1 2 3 is different. Now, how do you connect to the database? So before I connect to the database, let me actually run this particular command, db2 get connection state, and this particular command says that connectable and unconnected, which means this particular session is ready to connect to the database, but it is not in the connected state, unconnected. So this particular session is not connected to any database. So now if I want to connect to the database called first 1 2 3, so I'll say db2 connect to the name of the database, and if I hit enter, you can see we got connected. And if I run exactly same command, get connection state, now you can see we got connectable and connected, which means we have successfully connected to the database called first 1 2 3. That looks good. So now that we have connected to the database, so if I now want to create the table, insert the data, I should be able to do that. So let's do something like this. Let's create a sample table called employee. So let's create a table called employee with the two columns, employee ID with the int and employee name with the character. Let's create this. The table has been created, and now let's insert one record in that employee. So the first employee has joined our organization called Rock with the employee ID as 1. So that's completed successfully, and let's verify if that particular record is really present in our database, and yes, one rock is present, and let's commit this particular record. So this is how you create the table. Now that you have created the database, you can create the table, connect to the insert the data, delete the data, etc, etc. So whatever activity that you want to do with your database is ready for your application testing or connection by the application team. So in this particular tutorial, we learned how to install the software, how to download the software, how to install the software, how to create the instance, how to create the database, and how to connect to the database. And we did this on Red Hat Linux 9.4 using IBM DB2 version 12.1. I hope this particular tutorial was useful. If you did like the video, if you did like the content, then do hit the like button, do hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching and see you in next tutorial. Till then, bye bye, enjoy and have fun.